It's time for a Big Blue Kickoff Live.
Nobody can ever tell you that you couldn't do it, because you did.
On Giants.com.
You know what I saw? New York Giant Prime.
And the Giants mobile app.
17-14 is the final. One touchdown, we are world champions. Believe it, and it will happen.
Part of the Giants Podcast Network.
Let's go out there like a bunch of crazy dogs. Have some fun.
Hope everybody had a great weekend. Welcome to Monday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. I am John Schmeelk, joined by Paul Dottino. The phone number for you is 201-939-4513. We're going to have a couple of segments to try to jam in your calls around 1 o'clock between three of our guests. This is kind of our college basketball Monday of football teams here. We're going to have reporters and announcers that cover the UConn Huskies, the Duke Blue Devils, and the North Carolina Tar Heels. Now, two of those schools did not have great weekends. One of them did, and that's the one we're going to lead off with. We're joined by Joe D'Ambrosio. He calls the Connecticut Husky football games. Joe, you got John Schmeelk and Paul Dottino here in East Rutherford, New Jersey. I'm sure your weekend went well.
It did. It did, although I need you to talk me down off the J.J. McCarthy ledge. Please don't tell me that the team that I've followed since 1961 as an 8-year-old is going to use the 6th draft pick on him.
Well, I mean, Joe, I tell you, I don't think he's going to be there when the Giants pick at 6. So I don't think you're going to have to worry about that, to be honest with you.
All right. Okay.
Joe,
I'll take it.
Go ahead.
I'll take it, Schmeelk. I'll take it.
Hey, with any luck, Minnesota will draft up in front of the Giants and guarantee he's not there. How about that?
Now, in fairness, I
I'll
think
take it.
I think J.J. McCarthy is going to be a good NFL quarterback. I'm just not sure about the inflation that's happening with that a little bit the last few weeks.
I would agree. I mean, I think if he's 10, 11, 12, that's fine, but not the 6th pick when you've got other needs.
Yeah.
And you have a guy that you're paying a lot of money to.
Right, and there are other players that are going to be on the board that are legitimate top 10 blue chip players. All right, Joe, let's hit on UConn here. One guy that I really enjoyed watching down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl was your starting guard, Christian Haynes. Big guy, tough. He got into it with Jordan Jefferson at LSU. He got his helmet ripped off.
Yes.
But he did not back down for a second. He was a lot of fun to watch. Give us your experience with Christian as both a football player and a guy.
Well, I got to straighten one thing out first. I don't do the games anymore. I'm around the programs a lot. But our rights holders changed about 6 years ago, and I couldn't make the trip.
Oh, I got you, Joe. Sorry about that. My apologies.
That's all right. That's all right, Schmeelk. That's fine. You got a lot of things. You deal with PDOT. You got a lot of things to worry about. So, but I've been around. His coach, Jim Moore Jr., who's his head coach, loves him. His offensive line coach, Gordy Samus, loves him. Here's a kid who's just continued to get better every year. And while you don't think of UConn as a place where offensive linemen are born for the NFL, here's a kid who just got stronger, smarter, tougher, is willing to play either center or guard, although I think he's better fitted for a guard. He's been, if you're looking for a guy to be kind of like the poster child for a football program that's, let's be honest, hasn't been great over the last decade, Christian Haynes would be the guy. I think he'll make somebody a real good value pick in the second, or especially if he falls to the 3rd round.
A 4-year starter and a team captain, which says he's obviously got some maturity. He's obviously got some polish on him. How pro-ready is he, Joe, when he comes right out? Do you think he's got the ability to compete for a starting job right out of the box?
I do, Paul. I think he does, because I think he has risen to the competition. Some of the Power 5 schools that UConn has played, Haynes has had his better games against them, and obviously you saw what he did down at the Senior Bowl. He's not going to cower in the face of NFL defensive linemen. Now, if he goes against an Aaron Donald or a Dexter Hamilton or people like that, well, who's ready for that? But I think Haynes is pretty ready to come out of the chute and contribute right away.
Would you classify? I'm sorry, Paul. Would you classify him more as your mauling, overly physical, powerful type of lineman, or would you say he's more of your athletic guy that's going to block people on the move?
I think he's mauling with a good taste of athleticism, John.
That's a way to hedge.
That's a nice combination. I like that.
That's a good hedge.
You know
That's
what
a good
bothers
hedge,
me,
right?
Joe? You know what bothers me, though? Because we've seen here over the last, I don't know how many years, what's it, 25 years? We've seen Will Beatty. We've seen Matthew Pert. Both came out of UConn as offensive linemen who were projected to be, starters at some point during their careers. We knew they needed some polish, but neither guy ever lived up to their potential because both guys were more finesse players and for whatever reason never fully developed into what they were supposed to be. Now, again, I don't want to hold that against the program, but is that something that, would be a legitimate fear when you look at a Christian Haynes, or is he significantly different in terms of his makeup than those guys were?
Significantly different. I was surprised, Paul and John, that Beatty got that much run pre-draft. I had watched every one of his games for 4 years, and frankly, I didn't see it. Peart, I thought, could have contributed, and he just didn't pan out. I don't think Haynes is at all like those two kids were. I think Haynes is tougher. I think he understands what it's going to take to contribute in the NFL level and what a jump in competition it'll be. I don't think the sins of Beatty and Peart can be held against Christian Haynes.
Yeah, and look, I think, Joe, what I liked about watching Haynes on tape is that he finishes guys. Like, he will block you and then bury you. He will push you into the ground. He seems to have a bit of a nasty streak to him with the way he plays.
Good kid, but when he gets on the field, he's a little different animal.
And you want that. I think that's a good thing.
Oh, absolutely. Especially in the offensive line, John. I think that's important. You can't have somebody who's Casper Milquetoast playing in the offensive line, and that's certainly not Christian Haynes.
You got another guy who's 6'6", 274, and I kind of like those measurables, and Eric Watts along the defensive line. What are some of your thoughts as to his development and what he might offer?
I think he's a lower round pick, if not a free agent, Paul. I think he's another kid who's developed quite a bit, but I don't see him as a big contributor at an NFL level. I see him being a good backup, maybe a guy who can contribute in other ways. He's gotten better every year, so that's a positive. Obviously, he's improved every year. He's been the beneficiary of playing with a couple of guys at linebacker who have helped him make him look good. Kids who won't play at the pro level because they're just not big enough. Mm-hmm. But I think Watts. I wouldn't blame a team, guys, if they took a flyer on Watts in the later rounds.
I mean, you look at the measurables: 6'6", almost 36-inch arms, 275 pounds, ran a 4.67. If you're going to build a defensive end in a 4-3 defense,
those
in
are
a
sweet
lab,
traits, right?
That's what this guy looks like. So if he has all those traits, and a lot of the athletic testing was pretty good too, what held him back from becoming a more impactful player?
You know what, John? I can't. I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, they the interior of the defensive line has kind of been the strength of UConn the last couple of years, and the linebackers. And look, it's a defense that hasn't been great. All you have to do is look at the record and understand that. But I just think he's a little bit slower to develop. And again, in the right situation with the right tutelage, I think he can continue to grow and maybe play into that size.
If he's a late bloomer and he comes into this league, and if they could get some more strength out of him and maybe add another 10 to 15 pounds, he might actually be better off inside.
He's pretty tall for an inside guy.
He is a little tall. Mm-hmm. He is a little tall. But remember, Chris Canty was a big frame guy too.
As long as you're strong enough.
If you got the power, if he can convert the power quotient, maybe that's a better spot for him.
I don't know, Paul. I see him as an outside.
Okay.
I see him as an outside guy. I just don't know if he would convert that. he would convert that. If adding that size would take a little bit away from his speed.
Joe, I have not watched any of your linebacker, Jackson Mitchell. What can you tell us about him?
A terrific collegiate player. Played his butt off every play that he was on the field, the heart and soul of their defense. I just don't think he's big enough. Obviously, didn't get an invite to the combine. He's the guy who's going to have to make it as a free agent. But look, if heart and determination could be the byproduct and the result of becoming a good pro, Jackson Mitchell would be just a great kid, leader in the locker room and on the field in the right way. But I don't think the size works. Maybe a special teams guy. He might be able to contribute in that way. That's for sure.
Joe, you got a sleeper for us that maybe everybody's overlooking that may all of a sudden kind of pop up out of nowhere?
No, to be honest with you, Paul, no. I think those are the three guys who have who are guys who have a possibility off of last year's team who are eligible for the draft to play in the league.
All right, Joe, final question. Anyone that UConn played against this year that really jumped out at you that you don't think enough guys are talking about? Or you can just tell us what you think the Giants should do at 6, however you want to go.
I want a wide receiver. I want either the Washington kid or the LSU kid. I think if the quarterback's going to succeed, and you guys watch him every play, every game, and then watch every play 10 times again, then I want to see – I really like the Washington wide receiver. I think he's a hell of a player. I'd like to see them go there, but if the LSU wideout falls to 6, I won't be upset on draft night.
Paisan sticking together, Joe. I love it. Odunze's my guy too.
Yeah. I just like I just like everything about him. I like his makeup. I like his intangibles. I like the way he goes and gets the ball. I like the way that on the big stage, when he had the chance, he performed.
Yep.
Joe, awesome stuff, my friend. We appreciate it always. It's always good to chat with you. Enjoy the rest of your spring and summer, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Joe.
All right, guys. Thanks. Love your work on the air.
Appreciate Joe D'Ambrosio covers UConn up there. Does a great job. We've had him on before. Does an awesome job, and we appreciate him listening to our stuff, too. Big Giants fan, and we'll see what the Giants end up doing at number 6. Don't forget, folks, go subscribe to the Giants Huddle podcast. We're going to have Duke football, Dave Harding, their radio analyst, on coming up right now in just a second. Don't forget, you want more draft coverage, go around the draft. We do a ton of it, Giants Huddle podcast. Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. The last one up there is me and Chad Ryder, who does the longer 4-round mocks for NFL.com, does a great job. So make sure you go check that interview out with him. We focus much more on day 2 and 3 prospects in that. So
is his mock up yet that we talked about?
Yes, it is up there.
It is.
Our video on it isn't up yet, but the mock itself.
Oh, okay.
Go to NFL.com.
There were some names there.
Yeah, you can go check it out. And we do a lot of day 2 and day 3 guys. This is, earlier in the week, we did a lot of early round 1 stuff. We did much more round 2 and round 3 stuff and day 3 stuff with Chad, who, digs deep into this draft stuff. He's wonderful. So make sure you go check that out on the Giants Huddle podcast. You also have draft season, by the way, our draft podcast with Tony, Pauline, and I. You can go subscribe to that as well. Next episode's dropping tomorrow. We just went through how all the team needs changed in free agency and ideal picks for each team. And Tony also gives us all the pro day updates, and he's locked into scouts and agents in terms of what guys ran. So, again, you can find that on the Draft Season podcast. You can subscribe for both on your favorite podcast platform. Go to the Giants app, giants.com/podcast. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, leave that 5-star positive review for whatever Giants podcast you listen to. It really does help us out. All right, we'll get to your phone calls at 201-939-4513 a little bit later in the show, but right now we're going to welcome in Dave Harding. He's the radio analyst for Duke football. Dave, you got John Schmeelk and Paul Dottino up here in East Rutherford, New Jersey. I hope all is well, my friend.
Doing great. I just got a really, really bad April Fool's joke played on me. I bit it pretty hard.
What was it? What was it?
It's a work joke. Basically, somebody claimed that they lost all the files of a recent broadcast, and
oh boy,
it was actually the Pro Day broadcast. I'm sure we'll be talking about. So I didn't take it all that well. Luckily, didn't lose my cool completely, but we are good to go here in Durham, luckily, after a mild hiccup, we'll call it that.
That's funny. All right, well, let's start with Graham Barton, who I loved watching play tackle for you guys. I went back and when I watched him last summer getting ready for the year, I thought he was a first-round level pick, even if maybe the athleticism won't let him stay at tackle in the pros. Just talk about Graham. What is it like to be around him at the program and just the type of player and the guy that he is?
Yeah, he's been one of my favorite offensive linemen to watch in the entire ACC over the past, 4 years, really. I mean, he came in as a freshman in the COVID season and was thrust into game action due to an injury to one of the starters at snapping the football right in the interior of the offensive line at center, and really never looked back. Did a fantastic job. It was against NC State. They had a really good defensive line. Here's a young player asked to do a lot, and he did a fantastic job of it. And, early on you could see kind of the makings of what he's ultimately turned out to being, and that's a very physical offensive lineman with great motor and the just innate desire to finish his defender into the dirt on every single play. And as the years have gone on within the Duke football program, we've seen him become more and more polished as a lineman. We've seen the technique kind of catch up. His body certainly has caught up. I thought on last week for the pro day, he looked great. I mean, he's coming off an upper body injury where he had some surgery required, so did not end up lifting in the bench portion, but he is a very powerful offensive lineman, physical, 311 pounds, and can fly. I mean, he ran an unofficial 4.40, which is just insane.
Yeah.
So he's the complete package. And then I had a chance to catch up with him after, and I tell you, everybody's going to kind of gas their guys up, but I legitimately, Graham Barton is the ultimate teammate. And I had to pry information about his thoughts on his personal performance on the day, because he just wanted to talk about how his teammates performed and reflect back on how they did collectively as a group. He's just wired that way. And he's going to be, I think, a day one contributor clearly on the football field, just from a talent perspective. But then when you consider what he's bringing to a locker room and the blue collar nature, but also the team first mentality and mindset, you've got an instant leader in Graham Barton.
From talking to people around campus, whether it be the things they've heard from scouts or from talking to him, does it seem like there's really a two-flavor option here about tackle and about center? Are there teams that really strongly prefer him at one spot or the other?
Or guard.
And how does he feel? Have you had the chance to talk to him about preference of position? And since his experience at center is rather limited, does he feel comfortable about the upside there?
Yeah, I think he certainly does feel comfortable, and just some of my conversations with scouts and different NFL personnel along the way, I don't think there's any question in his ability to execute as a center and to get the ball snapped accurately. In fact, in his pro day, just to kind of double down on all of that, he had a football out there, and in many of the drills opted to snap, and that's really an option that you get. And I think that kind of helps for him kind of send home the message a little bit more that he is versatile. And outside of the physicality and kind of the mean streak that he plays with, I think the versatility aspect of his game is right up there when you talk about a strength component, and why he is going to be somebody that is so highly sought after. Because I truly believe, and you referenced some athletic limitations at the top of the interview. He does have some, like, he doesn't have the same range that you would necessarily see out of some left tackles across the league. The length, he looks a little bit boxier, like an interior lineman, but when it comes to the technique, the quickness, the foot speed, and the ability to redirect on the outside if a defensive lineman kind of tees you up on the edge, and then goes and reverses course to get underneath. He can handle all of that. And I think he's somebody that has great confidence in himself, but you kind of reference, upside. I think he still hasn't really fully matured as a lineman. And all the tape that we've been able to look at from his college career points like this is a stock that is just trending upward, and he continues to improve. He continues to learn. So I think he could have an impact at any position. And you mentioned, does he divulge where he would like to play? This guy is as crisp as it comes, and he was not falling for any kind of question in leading which way, one or the other. It's the same thing as like, where would you like to play at the next level? And I believe Graham when he says it, that truly he wants to play wherever he's going to have the greatest impact for the team. And he showed that every single week at Duke, toward the end of his career here, the latter part of this past season. I mean, he was beat up. And I referenced that upper body injury. He had some lower body things going on that made it really hard for him to go out and play, but Duke needed him. And he went out and was a warrior. And I don't think that there's any question in the selflessness that he's going to bring. So wherever he's asked to play, even if it maybe doesn't put him personally in the most comfortable position, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I want to follow up real quick on the position versatility, and then we'll move on to Dwayne Carter here. He played 435 snaps at center in his first year, but he's been a 3-year starter at left tackle since. Is center and guard something that he still works on during practice? Has he been completely away from it over the last 3 years? And what's your feel for a guy that is 6'5" and 314 moving inside, and whether or not he can be powerful enough to move people if he gets moved into guard or center?
Yeah, I don't have any concerns whatsoever on his power or his ability to operate kind of in that phone booth, that short space.
Yeah.
With the nucleus of the offensive line. I think he would be able to drive somebody off of the ball. He's got fantastic leverage, good hand placement, and his leg drive. I mean, you've got to be explosive to move 310 plus pounds at a 4.84 clip.
Yeah.
Like that 10-yard explosive-ness is certainly there. And he's benefited greatly from the strength and conditioning program at Duke, but I think, and he would tell you the same thing, his body changed significantly over the past 2 years with a new strength coach coming into Durham. And I just think he's just getting this thing rolling and has the opportunity to bulk up even more if needed, or certainly get even leaner and stronger. He still considers himself, moldable or at the point in his career where he, like we've talked about already in this interview, he's got upside. And you ask also, is that something that he's repped at practice? It is, because Duke had some injury issues across the offensive line a season ago. I alluded to the fact that he was out there battling through injury. There were numerous lineup changes, several weeks where nobody knew who was going to be snapping the football and out at practice. And again, points to the selflessness and the team first mindset that Graham has. He's out there snapping the football, taking reps, making sure that he kind of remains crisp and up to date, if you will, on his ability to fire off of a stance with a football in his hand, or to get down in a left-handed or a right-handed stance and with his hand in the dirt, or even out of a 2-point stance, out at the perimeter at tackle. So he has continued to work on his craft across the board, and and just getting the gauge of what he said coming off of his tour around the NFL, being in Indy and talking to a lot of the scouts. They feel confident in that. I think that the intangibles are all there, and any team that gets him is going to be very lucky.
Yeah, he sounds like a coach's dream. All right, now if iron sharpens iron, Dave, tell me, when he was working on the inside, how much he went after Dwayne Carter, your really good defensive tackle, and how did those battles go, if you were able to identify any of those won losses during those workouts?
Yeah, that's a perfect segue because these two players made each other better. They've been competing against each other for years, and both of them are similarly minded in the fact that they're looking out for the team. And so they realized early on that they had a responsibility to set the tone along the line of scrimmage. And I tell you, practices were heated. I'm not talking, fights and throwing punches.
No, but they got after it, right?
But exactly. And the jawing back and forth. But as soon as practice is over, they're the two of the best friends and the best leaders that you could ask for off the field. So 100% Graham has been improved by Dwayne, and Dwayne definitely improved by Graham. And similarly to Graham, Dwayne Carter, I think, and you don't talk all that much about versatility out of a defensive lineman, but I think he's got the ability, and the scouts that I spoke to at Pro Day agree. He can get in there and play head up over the center, or in a tight shade technique, or slide a little bit further outside. Now, I don't know if you're lining him up necessarily at defensive end, but a 3 technique, he's certainly able to do that. And I think you turn on the tape, and it's a similar tale of what Graham exudes, and that's great effort and finish. I mean, number of times over the past 2 years in particular where there's a screen that maybe breaks 10 or 15 yards down the field, and it's kind of into no man's land in the course of a game where it hasn't yet reached the safeties, or maybe the DBs are turned in man-to-man coverage running with their receivers, that Dwayne Carter was able to chase down a running back or a receiver out on the perimeter. It's wild.
That's a scary thought.
It really is. You see this guy running, he weighed in, I think, at 304 pounds at Pro Day, flying to the sideline and wrecking people. And the effort that takes, and sometimes these plays were happening when the game was already decided, positively or negatively, where a guy who has pro aspirations, especially this past season with it being his last year, had the chance to kind of hang it up and say, I'll let somebody else take care of this. And he is a full-on motor guy. And the impact of someone who's willing to kind of put the pain aside and has the toughness mentally to work through fatigue and to motor through every play on a consistent basis, that's what moves you into the elite echelon. And this player in Dwayne Carter is the ultimate competitor, in my opinion. And then, I mean, if we want to clear the next hour, we can talk about what he's like off the field. They call him Mr. Duke. He's basically the mayor of Durham already. I mean,
Mr. Duke.
in the office. He is Mr. Duke. And listen, I played at Duke. I thought I was amicable. People liked me. I didn't even scratch the surface of what Dwayne Carter's been able to achieve. This guy is remarkable. So probably not going, the same round as we're talking Graham, but I think Dwayne Carter, a diamond in the rough, if there's ever been one, for a guy that's going to handle himself professionally and be one heck of a competitor along the defensive line.
I appreciate the attitude and the traits that you talked about, but you did kind of slip in at one point there, played through pain. Do you have evidence that he actually did play through some injuries there? Because obviously a guy who does that shows more guts, fortitude, and shows he's a gamer. Was that also part of what you saw?
I mean, I don't know, like a diagnosable injury. I think for Graham certainly did. Dwayne, I believe, off the top of my head, I can't tell you what his ailment was, but shoot, anybody playing along the defensive line for 4
yeah, right.
You second guess yourself. You walk up on a set of stairs and you're like, "Where's the elevator?" Because I cannot handle the joint pain going up.
I got you.
Things.
Okay.
And your hands are all mangled. Your body doesn't feel good, and never once. And more, what I was alluding to is like, you never saw a reduction in the effort. You never saw a change in the attitude. I was as salty as they come walking out to practice. I didn't want to go out there. I was just trying to hold on for the ride. And that's probably why I didn't play for the New York Giants, whereas Dwayne Carter's got a heck of a chance because it's that consistency. And Aaron Donald is the guy I played against. And the thing that made him so scary, and we saw it translate into the league, is the fact that every single play he came after you, no matter how he was feeling. It was like everything happened in a vacuum. And that vacuum was the perfect environment for Aaron Donald to compete and to go in and rip your head off. And Dwayne Carter's got a similar feel to him and has that similar personality where he's able to compartmentalize so well to where he's tired, everybody else is tired. He knows that, but he's able to kind of switch that part of his brain off and go out there and compete at a very, very high level of effort. And for a defensive lineman to do that, especially when you're asked to run all of the field like we just talked about, really impressive.
All right, Dave, final question. Any of the other guys coming out from Duke that you really think we should have our eyes on as a potential guy that can contribute in the NFL level?
Sure, yeah. I think Jalen Calhoun is a good person to look at. A wide receiver, probably play the slot in the next level. He's a player that made some big plays for the Blue Devils during a very long career. There's actually, several as I think about it. Jamion Franklin, a defensive lineman, Vince Wilfork, not as big, but plays that way as a run stuffer along the interior. Was a Notre Dame transfer that came in and played for Duke. So it was a fun pro day to cover just because there are numerous players that kind of come to mind. But I think you've definitely hit the nail on the head with the top two. Jacob Monk, another offensive lineman, as I'm thinking through it, is a really good player. And Duke, has a good history, not just of these first-round guys, Daniel Jones, Laken Tomlinson along the way, but a history of undrafted free agents or even players that didn't even get a UDFA deal right out of playing and ended up just making it onto a roster through a tryout later on, becoming really good contributors and not necessarily role players, but valuable members of a team, not the folks that are your household names, but have turned it into really good long careers. Lucas Patrick, most recently with the Chicago Bears, comes to mind. Several folks. Noah Gray just won a Super Bowl this past year at tight end. Nobody talking about them, but now they get into a system. They've got that professionalism we've talked about, and they're pretty good athletes to go along with it. They're really good fits for a lot of these programs. Dave, awesome stuff. Tell the folks where they can find you and all your stuff. Yeah, GoDuke.com, D. Harding Jr. on X. And anytime Duke football's on the radio, you can tune in because we all know TV is overrated, right, guys?
Thanks,
Dave. Good stuff, man. Dave Harding. He's a radio analyst for Duke football. Great information, Dave. We really appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Be well.
Okay.
Good stuff. That's Dave Harding. Really good stuff. And yes, TV can be overrated. We love radio here. Thanks for being with us, Dave. 201-939-4513. 201-939-4513. We're going to stay in the state and go to Jason Staples, who covers the North Carolina Tar Heels for Inside Carolina, about 5 or 6 minutes. But we can try to squeeze in a call or two before then at 201-939-4513. Right, let's go to Bobby in Long Island. Bobby, you're up next on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Bobby, what's going on?
Hey, what's going on, boys? First time, long time. I really appreciate you guys. You guys get us through the off season. It gets pretty boring this time of year.
Appreciate that, Bobby. What do you got today?
Yeah, no, I know a lot of people are kind of freaking out about the top of the draft. I just feel like whichever way they go, offensive lineman, wide receiver, quarterback, I feel like it's kind of hard to miss at 6.
No, it is. Look, there's going to be a lot of really good players, Bobby. I think the Giants, I feel like, Paul, it's going to be the offensive side of the ball, right?
Yeah. Look, we've been talking all along since the Combine about how many blue chip guys there are, and none of us can figure out how the Giants won't have access to a blue chip player at 6, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We've made that pretty clear. Mm-hmm. The blue chippers will probably get down to 8, somewhere between 8 and maybe 10 for sure. I mean, like the really, really solid blue chip guys. So how do you miss if you're 6? Pretty hard.
Hey, one more thing, guys. Just while I was listening to your guest, Dave, I was scrolling Twitter. There's something about Eli Manning coming back to the NFL.
What are you talking about?
I was scrolling on Twitter. There's something about Eli. He's making a turn.
Let me look. I'm sure that's nonsense.
Put it this way. He's got a show here on Giants.com that appears every once in a while, periodically.
Well, I just don't know if is it coaching or is,
Well, Paul,
what do you got? Oh, boy.
Hold on. Let me
We'll
check.
We'll check.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Look at that.
Yeah, we're going to check in on
Paul,
this.
comment on the bottom from ESPN right here.
Yeah.
Eli Manning and the New York Giants are finalizing a 1-year deal. Sources say that Eli will be a primary role model for the rookie the Giants are going to draft a quarterback. It says it right there. Maybe like coach player. What else? Bleacher Report. Oh, my God. Look, it's all over the place.
Wow.
What do you think?
Wait a minute. Today's April 1st, isn't it? Yeah,
Paul,
it
it's
is.
all over the internet, Paul. What are we telling you?
It's April 1st.
Paul, it's on Twitter. I'm showing you the
Okay.
Twitter page.
It's also April 1st.
It's on 3 different pages.
Okay. It's
What,
also
you think media companies have all come together to try to do this
Yeah,
joke together?
you know what? See, here's one of the problems, folks. Everybody in this building knows how honest I am.
And how
Okay?
gullible you are.
I am incredibly honest, and I don't BS anybody. You see, and part of that problem is because I am so honest and so forthright, and I don't play fraud or facade. I try to give everybody else the benefit of the doubt that they'll do the same with me. Unfortunately, that leaves me open to a lot of very funny situations.
I got it for about 15 seconds. I think about 15 seconds he was thinking
Yeah,
about
maybe
it.
about 12. Maybe about 12. See, because Eli's in great physical condition, and he's certainly not too old to play. Tom Brady played into his 40s. So for a few seconds there, I actually kind of did ponder that and just kind of like, But
did you recognize that voice?
no, actually, I did not.
That was Charles.
That was Charles.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was Charles. Now, here's the
That's
question.
a good one, though, guys.
Now, here's the question.
It's a really good one.
If the Duke guest didn't mention the April Fool's joke, would it have had a better chance of getting you?
No, that had nothing to do with it.
Okay, I was worried. When he mentioned April Fool's, I'm like, oh my God, he's going to make Paul think about this. He's gonna ruin
Maybe
the
the 10 seconds that I was trying to process this, maybe that's about the best you were going to do. So you did as well as you could. I'm impressed.
This actually was not my idea, for the record.
It was not.
It was not my idea, no.
Oh, come on, but you're so dastardly. I knew that would be
well,
you.
Once it got proposed to me, I was all about trying to execute
Of course
as well
you
as I could.
Same here. And you can open your computer again, by the way.
Yeah, that was the reason I wanted your computer closed, so you wouldn't check for yourself after the prank call came in.
Oh. So, Pearson, you were in on this.
Oh, everybody was. Everyone's upstairs listening right now.
Okay, so
live.
who was the offensive coordinator behind this? There had to be a root to this whole evil plan.
You're going to have to investigate that for
All
yourself.
right.
You're a reporter. You're gonna have to
Would you
figure
have
that out for
believed
yourself.
coaching for a little bit?
If you came back as a coach, we were having a debate whether or not to make you play coach and do it that way.
I probably would have been a little more believable had you said like offensive consultant.
Okay.
That would have had me really kind of scratching my head for a good 30 seconds.
It also wouldn't have been a juicy thing though either. That would have
No.
been like whatever.
But the dummied up graphic that you had on your phone was very good.
Yeah, the people upstairs did a nice job with that.
That was how many days did it take to prepare that? It had to be at least since last week. You didn't just do that in 5 minutes.
We've been cooking a little bit.
I bet you have. Oh, wow.
For 15 seconds, the look on your face almost made it worth it.
It should be. It was good.
Yeah, it was not
It was really good. I will always give credit where it's due, and it was really good. So, Pearson, I'm surprised at you, though.
Oh, Pearson, why? He's from Boston. You can't trust people from Boston.
I don't know. I'm a little surprised about him. I'm not surprised.
No, you shouldn't be.
No. Anyway.
All right.
Wow. How about that?
We do have one more guest, and we'll maybe try to squeeze in one more call before we go. But we're not going to have a ton of time here because North Carolina, quite frankly, has a really, really strong football program right now. With Mac Brown down there.
Yeah.
They're doing a really nice job. So
sure do.
Even though they had a disappointing round in the NCAA tournament, getting knocked out. And I fell for it, too, because Hubert Davis is the head coach, being a big Nick guy.
What a great guy.
And after the game, he was really emotional about it, too.
He is
really
class all the way.
A great coach. But North Carolina, not just a basketball school anymore, really good football program, and we have a lot of prospects to talk about from North Carolina with our guest joining us on the phone right now to talk about those North Carolina prospects. We are joined by Jason Staples, who's a football analyst for @Inside Carolina. Jason, you got John Schmeelk and Paul Dottino here in East Rutherford, New Jersey. Happy April Fool's Day. Hope you all is well.
Is it just coincidence that I'm brought on April Fool's Day, or is this part of the plan?
No, Jason, you will enjoy this, though. We actually had this was kind of on purpose, I guess. We had our UConn guest, our Duke guest, and Carolina today. So this is like all of our basketball schools that we're talking football with today.
That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
That does make sense. Then.
It absolutely does.
And now, like you do, we just got off with Dave Harding, who's the radio analyst for Duke. Now you can try to one-up him, being from North Carolina, which I know you guys like to do.
We know that.
And we're going to start with the quarterback position. And Paul and I are both huge fans of Drake May. For me, he's my quarterback, too, after Caleb. I believe he's Paul's quarterback one, if I'm not mistaken. We watched him on tape. We know he has every physical tool and trait in the book. But as Joe Shane, the Giants general manager, likes to say, finding your quarterback is more than just what they can do on the field and see on tape. It's about talking to them, the personality, their processing, their intelligence, their leadership. Dig into that part of the equation with Drake May for us, stuff that we can't see just watching tape.
Every report from inside the Carolina program, and, you talk to the staffers there and other players and everything, he passes all of the intangible stuff. He passes with flying colors. I mean, this is a guy that I think, in terms of the wiring for all of that, is wired well to walk into an NFL locker room day one and start earning the respect of the vets. He's not going to be a guy that's going to walk in and act like he already has it. He's a worker. He's going to earn that respect, and then he's going to find ways to actually lead by example, and then ultimately lead verbally. He's the whole package in that respect. It's also one of the benefits of, he's a legacy. His dad played college football, was a quarterback. He sort of grew up and has the pedigree, not only physically, but when you grow up in that context, there's certain expectations. He grew up in a family of athletes.
High-level athletes. High-level athletes.
You look at what his brothers have done, and he brings all of that to the table, as you would expect.
All right, I'm going to ask you to do something. I asked the guy from Oregon, because I'm also a big Bo Nix guy. He's my second quarterback. I asked him, I said, okay, nitpick him for me. Give me something that's really wrong with this guy, because I'm huge on Bo Nix, but my number one guy is still May. Of all the criticisms that those people who try to knock him down say, arm strength is one that they kind of get on. They're like, oh, he's got average arm strength.
Which, by the way, I think it's insane. I think his arm strength is ridiculous.
I think it's plenty fine. Plenty fine.
It's elite, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But anyway.
So help me out here. If you had to nitpick this guy, if you really had to dig, what is wrong with him? What would make him fail if he was picked that high in the draft?
So, first of all, as far as the arm strength thing, I think that's nonsense. And I think part of it is based on the fact that he's not first of all, he's not Josh Allen, right? There's only a few guys that have that kind of arm strength.
Correct.
Yeah.
So he's not that. That's what I would consider elite arm strength. I don't think he's that, but I think he's on the top end. He'd be an upper end arm strength for the NFL.
Yeah, that's fair.
And the reason that he doesn't get as much credit for that is because he throws with so much touch. He layers his throws. He does a really good job on that. And when you have a guy that doesn't try to throw it through the wall very often, you don't see it as easily. But, at his pro day, you could see the ball, flying off his hand, and you go, okay, the arm strength is a non-issue. Where he has had significant weaknesses, and I did and this is something I do for Inside Carolina every year. I do preseason scouting reports for all the players that are going to play that next year, and I did this for Drake the last couple of years. And you can go on Inside Carolina and see my pre-2023 scouting report, which I think holds up now.
And the first thing on there is his footwork and mechanics overall need refinement. He tends to bounce in the pocket rather than keeping his feet on the ground. There are a lot of times where he doesn't have his cleats in the ground in the right way to be able to be ready to throw on time. So there are times where in his drop, he's just a little bit off the timing with the different routes. There are times where his body angle, he's forcing himself into off-platform throws even when there's not pressure because his footwork has been really, really sloppy. Now, a good portion of that, a lot of that is because under Phil Longo, they were a backpedal team in terms of how they did everything. There was no coaching of drops. There was no coaching of traditional footwork. It was just backpedal and be ready to throw. And you could see that in his game. There's just a sort of sloppiness to it. And that, I think, was the primary source of certain inaccuracy that he would have 2 or 3 throws every game where it's, there's a guy open and it's a throw that should be a routine throw for him, and it's a routine throw for him the rest of the game, and you'll just see him skip it. And you're like, where in the world did that come from?
Yeah, it's
and
funny.
Then you play it back and you're like, okay, that's because his footwork, he didn't have his cleats in the ground, or he was off timing by a half a second or whatever. And if he cleans that part up and gets his feet connected with the routes, does everything from that part correctly, all of a sudden those little misses go away. Because when he's in rhythm, and even when he's off script and he's actually having to throw in that context, he's so accurate. It's just those hiccups from the lack of mechanics that are infuriating. But the thing is, that's very correctable, and that's why I think he's a great prospect.
You just need a little polish sometimes.
Jason, I'm with you because
That's all.
you're right. You'll see these, and the term I used is scatter shot because he throws it so well, and all of a sudden it's like he airmails one, and then he bounces another. Then the next play, in a much tougher throw, he squeezes this ball into this 1 yard window in the middle of the field between 3 defenders, and you're like, oh, there it is. And that's kind of where I want to touch with you. What I love most about Drake is that, especially it was the Georgia Tech tape that really jumped out at me. The number of NFL-level throws in that 10 to 25-yard area in the middle of the field where he's throwing it what looks like almost a defensive team meeting, but he's putting it into the exact right spot. And it's not a lucky throw. He's putting it in the exact right spot to complete those passes. To me, there are more of those NFL-level, middle-of-the-field, intermediate area, which is, I think, where you have to make your living in the NFL, on May's tape than anyone else's. Why do you think he's so good at attacking that middle of the field?
Well, I think one of the things is his basketball background. So, I'm of the view that multi-sport athletes at quarterback are generally to be preferred. You look at somebody like Patrick Mahomes, and a lot of the throws that he makes are the kinds of throws that baseball guys have to make.
A shortstop.
Where they're he's playing shortstop at quarterback, and he's stepping up. He's a little off platform or whatever, and he just finds a way to stick it in there. And you get guys like that. And May actually, in the way he handles a lot of those throws in the open, in the middle of the field, there's a Mahomes-esque quality to what he's able to do. Stepping up off platform, whatever, and squeezing stuff in and layering it in the middle of the field. He does stuff that is, like you said, next level in that regard. And I think a lot of it is, again, the basketball side of him, because he's an outstanding basketball player, just like his brothers. And it's a point guard thing. He's a guy that understands and sees where guys are going to come open.
Right.
And, the best point guards, the best basketball players, they're not passing once a guy has already cut to the basket and is open. They're anticipating the cut, and they're getting it on him before he cuts, and they throw him open. And he's just got that knack. And some guys have it, some guys don't. It's hard as heck to coach and to coach into a guy. And when a guy has that, then I think that raises his ceiling for the NFL, because so many times in the NFL, you have to throw guys open. They're not open, but he's going to be open in just a second if you put the ball here. And, I think that's one of the most difficult things. That was why when Marcus Mariota came out, for example, I had a lower grade on him than a lot, because I thought he was a pick and pop guy.
It was all perimeter stuff. Yep.
Yeah, he threw only once guys were open, and it was all in the perimeter. And I think that's a similar thing for Jaden Daniels. He's struggled when throwing over the middle and throwing guys open. He just doesn't trust his eyes. He doesn't see everything that's there, and he'll pull it and run instead of making that throw. And Drake is absolutely fearless. He sees it and pulls that trigger and will put balls into those spots. And you're like, oh, man, like, how did he even know that guy was going to be open? And it's because of that basketball, that quick processing thing, I think, that he's just got. And to me, that's why he's my quarterback one in this draft, is because I don't even see some of that with Caleb. Caleb is super talented when it comes to all of the physical tools. And, you know, he does make a lot of those just wow throws. Mm-hmm. But when you're talking about making those between the hashes, between the numbers, layering those throws with different touch and all of that, I don't think there's another quarterback in this draft who does it the way that Drake May does.
That's
and
fair.
That, to me, sort of sets that ceiling higher than anybody else.
Yeah, those are more of the routine winning football plays as opposed to the splash plays. And I'm with you. I'm with you on that 100%. The question I have is, and I know he's going to be a top 3 pick in all likelihood, but certainly by top 5.
He should be.
He should be. Now, here's the thing. He comes out early. He certainly has more eligibility left. To me, I'd like to know from you how much of these little scuff marks on him that need to be polished up to make him like the perfect prospect, how much of that could have been fixed had he stayed another year, because he was only a 2-year starter with the Tar Heels. And I know for his perspective, why would he stay? Because he's already going to get picked so high, it makes no sense for him to stay in school. But wouldn't that probably have erased all the doubters and all the critics who want to put scuff marks on this guy's fenders?
So I think you're right about that on the one hand, that he probably, with a lot of these things, and especially with Clyde Christensen, who is, you know, Andrew Luck's former quarterback coach, Peyton Manning's former quarterback coach, Tom Brady's former quarterback coach, with him, you know, in Chapel Hill and, you know, helping out there, Drake got better with that. And of course he got hurt in the Virginia game, which nobody really reported on because nobody was supposed to, but he got hurt in the Virginia game, and that impacted him the remainder of the year. But he did show some improvement from, you know, benefiting from Clyde there. And I think with another year in that context, he would have gotten better in those things. But we all also know that quarterbacks, the longer they stay in college, the more nitpicked they get. You know, the more you see one or two things that come up. So maybe that would have impacted, you know, people's opinions, and he probably would have come in with a lot of similar thoughts. And I think, honestly, the reason he ended up going pro, just being candid, I think if North Carolina had a top-level offensive line returning where he knew he was not going to get banged up,
survival.
He probably would have. I think he probably would have come back next year.
Okay.
I think he liked being in college. I think he liked, and there were rumblings from his camp that he was really considering staying in college another year. But you know, he got so banged up both years he played, and especially toward the back half of this year, that I think he probably made the call, partly based on that, and saying, well, I'm not 100% sure that the offensive line is going to be able to protect me in the way that I need it to in order to be able to ensure, first of all, that I'm not going to get actively injured for next year. And so I think that was a part of the business decision to go ahead and go pro.
All right, last one on Drake May, Jason. I want to make sure we don't give short thrift to the other really good players coming out of North Carolina. You've mentioned this already. I think he's very underrated as an athlete. The number of third downs he ran for this year and got first downs on those plays, I think is underrated. He's good. He's elusive in the pocket. There's all those really good things. So I think that's underrated. And then you mentioned the offensive line. I think when people point at some of those games at the end of the year where maybe the numbers weren't as good, Clemson, NC State, a couple of those games where I know people have dinged him a little bit for his performance in those games late. You actually go and you watch the All-22, which I've done. The kid has no time to throw. And quite frankly, not many guys were getting open down the field either. So I wonder how much, and then that leads to some forcing, some poor decisions. How much was he impacted late in the year by the things going on around him that maybe resulted in some of the play that people are questioning towards the end of the year?
So I think it was an enormous factor. And again, you not only do you have to look at what you see on the tape in terms of he's not getting time to throw and guys are not, open all that often, but he's also playing hurt. And, he was really banged up, and to the point where it was impacting how well he could actually throw the football. He was actually, he was gutting it out to be on the field. And that's something also, if I'm an NFL evaluator, I'm looking at that and saying, okay, this is a guy who's willing to play through that and who still is able to be productive and still able to make A-level throws when he's banged up and when he's not healthy, which is going to be significant parts of an NFL career, that actually, if I look at that as an evaluator, that's a check mark in his favor.
Agreed.
Not a negative for him.
That's how Ernie Accorsi felt about Eli Manning. Remember? Ernie Accorsi said Eli was all over the place at Ole Miss. They weren't giving him any help at all, and he was like, but this guy held firm and found ways to win games. So it's the same kind of philosophy.
Yep, and I think there's a lot of comparisons. Actually, I was going to bring Eli up in terms of how he handles the middle of the field, because there's some similarities to Eli in terms of how May works the middle of the field at times as well. And in terms of his frame and a lot of those things, he's a better athlete than Eli, but there's a lot of similarities there to a lot of the better qualities that Eli brought in. And I think that's one that is definitely an understated comparison, is that Eli, again, hung in there for a program that was not an elite program, playing against a bunch of elite programs when he was banged up and hanging in there. And you could see that in his NFL career. He was a warrior over and over and over again, and managed to be productive. And a couple Super Bowls, later, he had a pretty darn good career.
Yeah,
not bad.
Devontae Walker, someone we have to talk about next, because I know John was at Senior Bowl week, and that was not a good week for him.
Yeah, and it's funny going in. I'm like, I love Devontae Walker. Then he goes down to Mobile. He couldn't catch the football for some reason, which that wasn't really a problem during the year.
Yeah, watching the highlights during the course of the week on ESPN and NFL Network, and watching those practices, it was a real letdown. So tell us about what you saw and how surprised you were, and do you think that was just a blip?
So I'm not that surprised, but I do think it's a little bit of a blip. I think there is some reason for concern there as well. So Tez is one of those guys where, first of all, he's going to be one of the fastest players on the field. He ran 4.37, I think,
yep.
and that. And he could have run faster. I mean, he's a guy that could go sub 4.3 with a good start. He actually didn't have a good start on that. And his top end speed, he's not going to get run down by anybody in the NFL. If he gets behind you, it's over. So that's really what he brings to the table. But he's a very much in his frame athlete, and he doesn't. You look at his 3-cone, which I watched it at the pro day, and I don't remember the time I had for him exactly, but it was over 7 seconds. Like 7.2, which is not great for his position or size and weight. And I thought it sort of was a good illustration of sort of where his limitations are, and that's moving a little bit outside his frame, the side to side stuff. He struggles, and at the Senior Bowl, I didn't think the catching stuff was as big of an issue because he hasn't had a whole lot of problems catching before. It was more the difficulties getting off press, and more the difficulties of creating separation at the top of the route and those sorts of things, which these are areas where he's still really raw, and I think he has to improve. He has to really work hard on improving those aspects of himself athletically. The ceiling is there, but he's got to get to where he's not just a straight line player in order to be able to get off coverage more comfortably. And I think those two things are related. So when you aren't creating as much space as a wide receiver, and I played wide receiver, when you're not creating a bunch of space, it's harder to catch the football because you're dealing with more distraction. Mm-hmm. You're dealing with the effort of creating that space late, all of those things, and then you lose concentration.
Is that lack of want to?
Really what happened.
Is that lack of want to though, or lack of ability?
Think so. No, I think it's an issue of concentration where it's more difficult to do, and some guys are a little bit better at it in terms of contested mm-hmm. catches, and I don't think he's as much of a contested catch guy as a guy who is a contested catch guy would be a guy like Keon Coleman from Florida State,
mm-hmm. yeah.
who didn't have the best contested catch numbers this year, but he is a guy that has shown he can do it. That's kind of what you're getting there, and more of a basketball type player. With Tez, he's more of a guy that he's a vertical separation guy. You know what you're getting with him. To me, his value at the NFL level is you really have to treat him as a number 3 coming in rather than a number 1, and then you hope he grows into a number 2 and potentially even a number 1 because the talent, the speed is so next level that with some of those other things he could become a number 1. I suspect that he probably ends up being a number 2 if he develops kind of as I anticipate. But I think you have to bring him in initially thinking he's at. You there? Sorry.
Yeah, no, we got you. We got you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think you have to bring him in expecting that he's going to be a number 3 initially, and treat him as sort of a young Deshaun Jackson type, where you're just sending him on goes and trying to set him up where he's not in position where guys are getting their hands on him, and then you can create some problems. And ideally, a team that's going to use him in motion. He's a guy that with the cheat motion that teams are doing now, doing that sort of thing to get him free releases so that he can use that speed to create space. You can really open up your offense with that, but I think that's kind of where his value is, and it's a little bit more limited in terms of the overall skill set that he's going to bring to the table.
Well, Jason, I had a couple questions on Walker, but your answer was so complete. You answered both of them before I even had a chance to get to him. That was wonderful, and that was fantastic. Let's jump to defense. Cedric Gray, I think he's a darn good linebacker. I liked what I saw from him watching him live in the Senior Bowl in Mobile. But, linebackers, you have that almost different classes of linebackers now. Is he more of your run to the ball, sideline to sideline coverage guy? Is he more of your thumper, get in there and move people? Talk to us about Cedric Gray and what he would bring to the linebacker position.
He's definitely more of a sideline to sideline coverage guy. He was a safety in high school and moved down as he got bigger. And he still sort of runs like a safety. I mean, he runs really well. And he I think, demonstrated the ability to turn and run with not just running backs and tight ends, but to be able to run sometimes with even slot receivers and so on. He's a guy, honestly, character-wise and in terms of what he brings to the table intangibly, and just in terms of his fit for the NFL game, I would pound the table for that guy in the middle round area, third, fourth round area. I would think about that very strongly just because of all of those things. He's going to be a really good special teams player, which I think matters a lot in the NFL. And he's a guy that I know I put him out there. He's going to be in his spot. He's going to understand where he's supposed to be. He's got the athleticism to match up well in, match coverages, these sorts of things, and, not be a liability. And I think he's a guy that can grow into a solid multi-year pro who's a part of a good defense. The knock on him for me is sort of the lack of that pop power when he tackles. He tackles too much sort of through the side, and will give up some yards after contact and kind of drag guys down a little bit more than I'd like. But, that's just the nature of the kind of backer he is.
All right, I want to ask you about Myles Murphy because the measurables are really, really attractive, but the production doesn't necessarily match all the traits in the measurables. I'm curious as to, first of all, do you agree that maybe his career at North Carolina was a bit more disappointing and you would have liked to see him max out higher? And then why do you think that may have been true, and can he wind up getting the most out of himself as maybe a late bloomer when he gets to the NFL?
So he's an interesting and difficult player to evaluate, because I think Carolina's defensive line the last 4 years or so has been really poorly coached, and you can see it repeatedly in terms of, and it's not just one guy. And this is why I say it's bad coaching. When you see an entire unit, when you see 4 or 5 different defensive tackles showing terrible footwork, high pads, and different things like that, then you go, okay, look, this is a systemic problem. And he was one of those guys that had those problems, but he was by far not the only guy. So, the question is how much of that is so ingrained in him now that, it can't be fixed at the NFL level, and how much can he actually improve when he starts to play with proper pad level and getting a good first and second step and doing all that. Because like you said, the measurables are not bad. He's not an explosive guy, but, in terms of his, height, weight, and power numbers, they're pretty good. To me, you've got to have him as a run-stopping guy. You're not going to get pass rush out of him. If you're looking at sort of if you're wanting to play more skeptical here, the issue that I have with him beyond the coaching side or beyond where he was poorly coached is I think he's a top-heavy guy. He's a bit of a leaner. If you look at his legs, he's sort of on the smaller end, lower leg, sort of a thin ankles guy, and is a little bit more tight, tightly wound type player without a whole lot of hip movement. So you're not going to get a lot of explosion out of him. He's not a pass rush threat, I think, at the next level. And I think he is going to have to continue to improve his mobility and his flexibility in his lower half to be able to anchor and to be the kind of player to match on the field with what he, might match in terms of his overall power numbers. So I've got some skepticism about him in terms of as a prospect. I think the potential for him to get there is there, but I've just seen too much tape where he's kind of getting pushed around. And also, again, in person, when you actually see him move, a little bit more of a leaner, a waist bender rather than a hip guy. So, I think he's sort of bottom end of the draft if he's draftable, and there's some. I've got some skepticism there, to be honest, but that doesn't mean he couldn't do it. It's just a matter I would want to see in practice how quickly he's going to pick up on NFL level coaching and whether he can actually make a contribution there. Certainly a camp type guy that I could see finding a way to make a roster if he's in the right context with the right mix and the right coaching.
Jason, thanks for sticking with us. If there's anyone else, you can throw them in here. Otherwise, just tell the folks where they can find all your great work.
Yeah, the other players I think are mostly camp invite players. I think Bo Corrales, actually a former receiver at Carolina who then transferred out and then did his pro day here. He's an interesting guy who I would very strongly consider as a camp invite. 6'4" plus and ran 4.5 at his pro day, and then verted 37 and really interesting prospect that I think could be a long-term NFL roster guy that just didn't have it all go for him in college because of some injuries and other factors, some of the changes that had happened here. But he's a guy, and then a couple other guys on the defense, safety. There's one safety that they had whose name is escaping me right now, but Gio Biggers, who I think tested really well at their pro day.
Is that Jacurious Conley? Is that who you're talking about?
No. I'm talking about Gio Biggers.
Oh, I got
Giovanni
you.
Biggers. He's a guy that talking to their defensive coordinator, they loved him. They thought he just was so smart and always in the right spot. And he got banged up during his career, and the big issue for him is can he stay healthy? But he tested off the charts compared to what I expected at the pro day and looked healthy. So he's another guy that I would really look at as a camp invite because, again, you can't have too many smart safeties who are running
How
well
true.
and
How
good
true.
athletes. So those would be two more that I'd put in there. Otherwise, you can always find my stuff over at Inside Carolina, also at Doc Staples on Twitter or X or whatever Elon wants it to be called these days. But yeah, always available to chat as well. Thanks for having me on.
Jason, this was great, man. Best of luck the rest of the way. We appreciate the time and enjoy your offseason.
Take care.
All right, you guys too. Take
Jason
care.
Staples does a great job again at Inside Carolina. Go check him out on Twitter.
Yeah,
Fun show, Paul.
All three of our guys were very detailed.
I haven't gone back. I haven't listened to your Alabama guy with Cross last week, and I haven't listened to Lance and Sytak with Illinois and Utah. I want to say Pearson was the other one last week. I have not listened to those guys yet either.
All I could say is, as detailed as our guests were, you guys were very detailed with your little April Fool's joke, and that was even more detailed than any of our other guys.
Well, we don't.
Pretty amazing.
We don't do anything half, around here.
I get it. It's a good one. I just want to say it was real good. You know the shame of it? The shame of it was?
You actually were getting excited, like, I get to watch Eli play more football.
I haven't seen Eli, in gear and throwing a pass, even like goofing around out
Chad
here.
Powers, man. You saw Eli throwing the ball last year.
I know. I still to this day, I would like to see Phil Simms back on the field. I'd like to see Lawrence Taylor back out on the field.
Now, if you would have went along with it for one more question, I would have asked you, but Paul, this means his Hall of Fame eligibility gets pushed back into the 5 years.
That would be terrible.
And I know you would have gotten mad about that.
That would have made me very angry.
I know. That's what I wanted to get to that. I wanted you to do the football part first. Good stuff, Paul.
Okay, yeah. Very good.
Are you on? Do you know who's on tomorrow?
I don't.
Okay, neither
Offhand,
do I.
I think we're doing Washington.
It's Casillas.
Huskies,
Oh,
I
so
think.
maybe it's you and Casillas? Are
I
you
think so.
booking Washington or
I am
Lance?
booking Washington.
Okay, so you are on tomorrow then.
Yes, that I know.
Okay, so it is you and Casillas.
That I know.
And you'll be talking some Washington Husky football. So enjoy that tomorrow. A lot of guys to talk about there.
Yeah.
For Paul Dottino, I am John Schmeelk. Thanks for joining us on Big Blue Kickoff Live on this very happy April Fool's Day. Thank you to our guest, and we'll see you tomorrow at 12:30 for another episode.